Good morning. This is the third video in the introduction. There are two things that I want to do in this third video, and they may spread over the next couple because I'm trying to limit these to at least 10 minutes, or at most 10 minutes. One, I want to say something about this stereo reel term that I threw out last time. It'll take us some time in this series to get where we can boil that down into something that is really digestible into meaning, into genuine meaning in our perceptions. But I threw that out as kind of a curveball last time because that's where we're going. I stated that the people before us, especially in 1900s, early 1900s, they had more of a stereo reel perception of themselves in the world they're in. They had more of that than we do, and I want to see our children have some ability to get back to a balance where they have stereo reel perception. The meaning of that, well, that's the first thing. I'm going to say something about stereo reel to give you a preview. But the other thing is that I also want to speak a little more about this boiling down process, give you a bit of history, excuse me, about that. And this boiling down process that we'll go through. The idea of stereo reel is built in to the title of this series, Science, Spirit, and Well-Being. Right or wrong, however you think about it, earlier generations saw the world in terms of material world and something deeper, some other non-material reality. Whether they thought of that, there were stories of God and spirit and soul, and the people before us, long before us, were comfortable with that language. They had perceptions of reality in terms of the material world and the non-material world. Science and spirit. Science falls heavily, or has traditionally fallen heavily on the material world. In science, the center of focus is material, atoms. How atoms act, where they're located, how they move, and how they interact with each other. So science has been about the material world, and spirituality and religion has had a language of another channel, those two stereo channels. Now, what I'm saying is that not that religious language is correct or right or wrong, whether traditional language speaks a form of truth. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is those two stereo channels, one and then the other, that work together. We have two eyes. We have the reality of one eye and the reality of another eye merged together to give us depth perception. We have the reality of one ear merged with the reality of the other ear, perception of the other ear, to give us orientation. We have the left foot and the right foot together give us choice of movement. Same with left and right hand. Now, I'm not saying our two brains are so clearly left and right have to do with material and spirit. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact is, we have two halves of the brain, and we know that they are some sort of stereo thing. And so it just makes sense to me, and we'll boil things down here in the process of this series to try to make it make sense to you, that regardless of what the content of that other channel is, it is healthy to have a stereo reel view of reality of who we are and where our place is in the world. Okay, so I wanted to say that we'll get to that, boil that down into something more meaningful. The other thing is I want to give you some background on this boiling down process. The boiling down process is not new to me. Although as I went through my career crisis, kind of had a realization about, well, hey, maybe my life isn't adding up, maybe it's boiling down. But after that realization, looking back, it's been that way all along. I guess I feel like I'm fortunate that I'm not all that smart. I was smart enough to get into the academic stream that put me with a bunch of smart people, especially at the University of Toronto. But always in my career, I have learned something well enough to do well on the test, well enough to do the things that you do with it, engineering things, but always had the feeling that I didn't really understand it. I would learn something, but just had this anxiety that I did not really understand it. So I would spend my time trying to boil it down and understand, what it really means. And then when I was doing research, the thing that got me success was asking what's wrong with this picture in almost everything that I looked at. What's wrong with this? Why doesn't it work? I don't quite understand it. Can I get to the bottom of this? So that's been true all of my career. And I want to tell you about 4 fundamental questions that I ended up asking myself when I was in the throes of this despair about a collapsing career. I'll tell you more about how that happened, because it's an interesting thing, but interesting story. But for right now, I just want to give you those 4 questions. The 4 fundamental questions that occurred to me, that came to me probably just at the time when I was starting with the social work, so we're talking 8 or 10 years ago, are these. First question is, what kind of place is this? Meaning, this world we live in, what kind of place is this? The second question is, has anyone ever seen a single thing? Now, we'll put that one aside, but it really has to do with this stereo business. Has anyone ever really seen a single thing? The third question is, what am I making of what the great minds of science have said? Notice the wording in that, and it's really interesting how the wording came about. That's a different story. I'm not asking I didn't ask myself, what have they said? I asked myself, what am I making of what they've said? And then the same thing about spirit. What am I making of what the great minds of spirit have said? Those are 4 fundamental questions that were boiled down during the sort of end of career crisis, when I was saying, well, okay, what's wrong with this picture? Things haven't added up. I'm not rich. I'm not that successful. I'm not famous. I haven't done the things that I wanted to do quite like I wanted to. Everything's good, but those things didn't happen. During that crisis, things boiled down for me to those 4 fundamental questions. What kind of place is this? Has anyone ever seen a single thing? What am I making of what the great minds of science have said? What am I making of what the great minds of spirit have said? And those 4 fundamental questions have driven me in the last 8 years or so in a further boiling down process, which is what we will dive into. I want to kind of lay out the remainder of this introductory section. In this introductory section, we're going to be slicing up ingredients for our roux. Remember, we're going to make a roux, and we're going to do it by slicing words and concepts and boiling them down, slicing some confusing things down and trying to liberate the value in them, try to get a little bit better understanding, and then take that and put it back together in a way that we can understand. So this is the 3rd video. Thank you. We'll see you next time.